Cool. So I can take this a bunch of different directions. I'd like to take it into the direction about this new plugin creator tool. I'd like to talk about that, but certainly we can see some questions as they fly in, and we can just kind of take it there. I'm sure everybody saw Danny's post about the new self-hosted release. That's kind of cool. There's not a whole lot of new with that other than just kind of supporting this new architecture. That was yesterday, last night, or whatever. Yeah, so A-Train Sync, can we talk about the rotation for the new core? Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. That's a fantastic idea, Tim. There's a bunch of stuff that I'd like to do with that, and maybe you guys can help me a little bit. But yeah, so let's put that. I'm gonna jot this down. Rotation. Epic Web, Sean, context menus in iOS 3.0. Yes, you can use a context menu now. So that's cool. Let me jot this down here. So let's do plugin. And let's do 3.0 rotation, which is kind of famously difficult, but that's cool. So let's start with the plugin stuff. A couple of things here. Plugin creator smug. Yeah, totally. Let's start with that. So I have a very basic thing to show you in terms of your control panels, and then something to show you in the plugin package, and then a little bit more to just kind of talk about. So as most of you know, Sue and I, mostly Sue, has been organizing a list of what we have now labeled developer shortcodes. And the purpose for a shortcode, just to repeat, just so everybody's clear, is so that when we're all making screens and making plugins, that we don't have file naming conflicts. And so if I have a plugin in a directory and it's got class files and images and assets and things, when I add that to a project, it won't conflict with something that you create that also has a bunch of files in it and stuff. And so this developer shortcode, you can now see your developer shortcode if you have one in your plugin, in your developer profile. And so as most of you have known, we've been allowing you to enter some development information about yourself for quite some time now. Things like what kind of environment you're in and whether you want to be maybe displayed in a developer page if we ever do that, and what your name is. And so we use a lot of this stuff for today for this plugin creator tool that we experimented with last year that now we've made a bunch of improvements to. And so none of this has really changed except now this plugin developer shortcode. So let's just revisit that really fast. The idea is when you make a plugin, you don't have to use a tool that we provide you. You can use anything you want. You can use a text editor, you can use Xcode, you can use anything really, and as long as you assemble the package correctly, in theory it should work just fine. However, not everybody realizes these ideas such as the naming conflicts and the file naming conflicts and things. And so if you start with the tool that we had on and now have off, and we'll have on again soon, the idea is it should make it easier for you, but it isn't necessarily easier for you depending on what your workflow is. And so a lot of you have seen me use Xcode to make plugins. Can you guys see my screen? LA's saying you can't see the screen. Am I sharing?
No, I'll turn you off and then I'll turn you back on here.
Okay.
You must have missed there's a pop-up that comes up. It must have maybe got covered up.
Maybe. I don't see it. Maybe I can just click the screen.
Yeah, we're going to redo it here. But I had to turn you off before I can turn you back on. Okay, now you should get the pop-up again.
Oh, there we go.
Yay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, so all I was doing was scrolling through this developer profile in my account that I'm logged into. So I'm logged into David's account, and I'm looking at my developer page, which allows me to make some entries and things. And so what we were talking about was this idea that we all have this developer shortcode. So, and the purpose of that developer shortcode. And so I don't want anyone to get confused about the idea that you need a developer shortcode to make a plugin, because you simply do not. You simply do not, from a technical perspective. However, there's a great benefit in using one and getting good at understanding why file naming strategies are good for not only you as an individual programmer in your development workflow, but also when you're working in a community. So when you're working in a community of people who are kind of taking similar approaches, it becomes very, very important to understand why certain things are certain ways. And so if you made a plugin, if I made a plugin today, it's displaying my developer shortcode, which is DB. It's a very simple couple initials or whatever. We're not going to want any numbers in that developer shortcode. We're just going to want letters. Hopefully just a couple of letters, but if we get, at a hand or somebody's got the same initials or whatever, we could do 2 or 3 letters, whatever. And so if I made a plugin called Image Gallery, then my folder name would be, DB Image Gallery. And you'll notice there's a lowercase file name there. Again, not critical, but just customary that we stick to these patterns. So the archive and the directory of my plugin would use a lowercase version of my developer code. And then the name of the plugin I'm going to make. And then the assets inside of the developer.
Oops.
I'll have them named with our code.
Thanks.
All of your class files should start with a capital letter. That's just the way it is. And so we're saying, hey, your class files, your .h, your .m, your .java, they should be capitalized. And then your file names don't necessarily have to be lowercase, but since we all know that Android insists that these lowercase file names are used, then yeah, why not just start with that behavior pattern in your workflow so that you don't get crossed up down the road if you decide to do Android or something like that. But I just want to make sure you guys know that these aren't rules that are imposed on you by us. These are just good things to understand when you're making software. And so I'll give you an example of how I do it. I don't always use DB in front of my source code files. I generally, the pattern that I've been in over a bunch of years, is I will prefix my source code files oftentimes related to the customer or the project. Like let's say I have a customer that I'm working with and I'm going to make class files for him. It's easier for me to prefix those names with a code so that when I'm looking at a long list of files or something like that, I can easily pick out what I developed for John or what I developed for Bill. And so again, good patterns like this are important. So we've put this shortcode in your control panel. If you don't have one, you can get one from Sue. I put her email address in here, and you can just click it and send her an email. If it gets overwhelming for her, we'll take a different approach. We could certainly make a little self-serve process or whatever, but she does great with this.
I love doing it. Don't hesitate to let me know. And everyone on the list, anyone that's on the list has one already. If you came in from the forum, I don't see anyone here that I don't have on the list, but everyone here has one. Yeah,
totally. And so, so just to summarize, you don't need a code to make a plugin, but you will need a code to put a plugin in the market. And so we're going to shift into that thinking for a minute, and we're going to open up the what I'm calling the new plugin template. And I'm going to be asking you guys some kind of questions about how this thing is arranged, and then we'll talk about some of the ideas that I have and kind of open it up for dialogue as we continue. Most of you have seen this stuff, right? And so when you create a new plugin, it's much easier to start with a template and start with a foundation for this. And so, for example, your 3.0 iOS stuff, you've got a view controller. And of course, the plugin creator tool just renames all these files for you and makes it tidy and specific to the file names you choose and things. But what I'm interested in doing is, and this will be fun to explore over the, into the future, what I'm interested in doing is you have a plugin here that you made, and this would be called, DB, just to kind of go with the example I used in our developer page. Let's say I was making a plugin called DB Image Gallery, and my .m file looked like this when I made it. Very simple, right? Super straightforward. You'll notice that there's almost nothing in it because the new core, does a lot of stuff for you. You don't even have to worry about. So we threw in an empty method, or what we call stubbed out a method called viewDidLoad, and Smug saying, yeah, in this case, the .h would have the same file name. you'd have, let me open up the .h, just kind of making some assumptions here, but yeah, this would be something like this. So db image gallery, and then of course the file name would be db image gallery.h&m. But my point is, and this is what I want all of us to think about, the blank methods, the stubbed out methods that come in your blank template so that you can make something cool, I just arbitrarily chose that, hey, let's throw the view did load in here so that you can kind of see, cool, this is already here for me. But you might, we might also add, view did appear, all these different built-in iOS methods. We could stub these all out also and include them in your package, just kind of out of the, just to save you time, supposedly. But I want to tell you why I didn't do that. And then I want to also tell you some of the other thoughts that I had, because I really think that we can make this better. I really think that we can make this better. When you're thinking about saving time, and you're thinking about making a plugin, we can inject code into this template very, very easily. And so imagine things like maybe a series of checkboxes that says, yeah, include the view, stub out the view did load, the load data, the screen rotated, the view will appear, all these standard things. And this could be iOS or Android, of course. And you could kind of sort of build up a pretty complete class file using this plugin creator tool. So I want us to just think in these terms so that as we have these conversations and we try to make improvements to the process, that we're all involved in this so that we understand why we're making these changes. So, today when you start using this tool, maybe this afternoon or whatever, you're just going to get a generic blank template like you've always gotten, and then we'll slowly start introducing these new ideas based on what all of us think is a good idea. Think of, for example, all of the necessary delegate methods and code that you need to run a map on a screen. Right? Lots of that code, you're probably copying, pasting it, whatever, you're looking it up on Stack Overflow, whatever you're doing. Why not just inject that into your blank class file from the beginning if you know it's going to have a map on it? These kinds of ideas. And so we can do a lot of that improvement stuff kind of for you if we think it's valuable. So that was an important concept. That's an important concept. Here's some other important concepts. When you make a plugin that has nothing to do with, maybe thinking about the market or putting it in the market or whatever, if you're like me and you're making an app, you're probably making more than one. You've got an app project, you need 12 new types of screens. So you end up repeating this process over and over again. You're copying class files, you're using Xcode, new file class, and you're naming things. It's just tedious. It's just tedious. And so imagine the core being blank. You've got a customer who wants an app that takes 12 screens. Some of them you're going to use plugins that somebody else made. Some of them you're going to make your own. That process is a pain in my mind. So I think it would be cool to be able to go to, say, your control panel and create 10, 12, 15 classes and nib files and all the parts that you're going to need when you drag them into this customer's project. And so you may or may not make those available on the market. I don't know. I don't really care. We're just saying we're trying to make it easier to make new screens for you, because our workflow around here is we're constantly repeating these steps and it's a pain, so we're trying to make that faster and easier. And that's where all of this stuff comes from is, hey, if we're making apps and this is a pain, it must be a pain for somebody else too. Let's come up with a better way to kind of do that. And so when we talk about this stuff in the forum and we talk about this stuff amongst ourselves in these meetings, I want you guys to constantly be thinking about, what is it about the process that sucks for you that we might be able to make easier? Mm-hmm. And I think you'd be surprised at the things that you come up with. I really do. And certainly we're going to come up with more than I can come up with. I can only come up with what's a pain for me. But since we're all different, we all have different pain points. And so that was that's something I think is really important. So that takes us to the next topic about the market, about the plugin package, all this kind of stuff. There's really three goals in terms of this plugin process that we're trying to accomplish. And one is, of course, the market, right? Let's share code, let's sell a little code, let's allow a developer with some enthusiasm to make a little bit of money by helping somebody, these kinds of things. So that would be use the tool, make a plugin, upload it to the market, pretty easy to understand. In order to do that, In order to get a plugin in the market, we need a plugin ID. So if we go to the market right now, this is easy to understand. I just want to revisit it because it's important. And I look at Chris One's advanced search plugin. This plugin has an ID. I've highlighted it in my address bar. That ID has nothing to do with the file system, the name of the plugin, the owner, none of that stuff. It's just a place in our system to keep track of this plugin. So when you upload a plugin to the market, we'll always need this ID, right? And the reason that this is interesting and important to know is this means that you can't take an existing plugin that maybe Johnny made for you last week and you want to add it to the market. If it doesn't have an ID in our system, it isn't going to work. It isn't going to work. And so that's the reason that we originally came out with the creator tool, was to establish this kind of identity for this coming plugin that you then upload. And so I know I'm talking fast and I know this is confusing, but if it's going to go into the market, it's different than if it's just going to go in your control panel. That's all I'm saying. It's different. And so if it's going to go into the market, you know, we need to honor those file naming convention rules. We need to honor, you know, the idea that we don't want to conflict with other people's stuff and that kind of thing. If it's not going to go into the plugin market, you just want to upload a plugin, okay, you know, go ahead. That's goal number 2 for us, right? We want to let you do that. We want to let you do that. And I'll give you an example of why that might be useful. Let's say you're making an app and you need a certain kind of plugin that you don't want to sell and you don't want to share, and maybe you can't make it yourself, and maybe you hire Kitsy to do it for you, and you give Kitsy $100, he makes you a plugin. It'd sure be cool to be able to add that to your control panel. So that's goal number 2, is we want to let you do that and use that plugin over and over again in your projects without having to go down the self-hosted route, without having to deal with stuff that maybe you're not interested in dealing with. So we're trying to add a little bit of flexibility there. So with that comes some risk for us and for you. For us and for you. And so the risk for you is might not necessarily be that easy to understand, but I'll try to kind of shed some light on one of my concerns. And this could happen in a lot of different ways, but let's say you hire Kitsy to make you a plugin for $100, right? He makes you a cool music player, you use it in some apps, you've got it in your control panel, everybody's happy. 3 months go by, 3 weeks go by, and you decide, hey, I'm going to sell this in the market. The control panel lets me do this. I just check some boxes. I give it a price. Well, you can see the conflict here. You might not necessarily be doing the honorable thing or the legal thing based on what the heck you're doing. So we can't have a situation where, you know, we're just running over each other and trying to help each other. And it's hard to even talk about because we don't think that anyone's going to do these kinds of things, but I guarantee you somebody will. And here's how they'll do it. They'll go to the market, they'll buy a plugin for $5, they'll see it's popular, they'll download it, they'll change the name of it, they'll upload it to the market, make it $3, and bury the guy who made it. Right? It's ridiculous. And so there's not really an automated way to prevent this kind of thing, is the message here. We don't have an automated way to prevent this kind of thing, other than calling Andy and sending him over, you know, with his bat. Because the dude's tough and he'll beat you up, right?
David, can I turn off? I can just turn off their developer access. Their developer.
We can punish them, of course we can. But that's not the spirit of what we're trying to do. No. We don't want to get into we don't want to get into an administrative situation where that's all we're doing is hunting people down. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Of course we can. Of course we can kick them out. Of course we can, you know, charge them with pitchforks and all that kind of stuff.
And we don't have to cut them a check at the end of the month if we think they're cheating either.
No, that's all after the fact, though.
Yeah.
Right? So if you think about our community, most of the stuff is easy. And as Sherry's pointing out, you know, the elephant in the room, we all know that there's jackasses that hang out amongst us. And it's after the fact that we all pay the price for it. We spend valuable thoughts replying to forum posts and defending our friends and saying, how did you do that? All these things. It's a pain in the butt. None of us want to do it. It makes for good gossip. It's fun to talk about. There's a little drama, I suppose. But it's a pain in the butt. And so I'm just telling you guys that we need to keep our eyes open and figure out better approaches as we move along, as these things surface, because they will surface. They will absolutely surface. And so if we're going to be true to open, and we're going to be true to transparent, and we're going to be true to, you know, letting people freely do things, it comes with these other side consequences that none of us like. But it is the reality. So goal number 2 for the plugin market is to let you upload whatever the heck you want, as long as it, you know, fits in the model. Go ahead, and we will just have to see what happens in terms of people turning things on. It's probably not going to be that big of a deal, but it could turn into a big deal, and we just need to pay attention to that stuff. Smug saying, coming this fall to reality TV, the developers of Buzztouch. You know, no joke, no joke. I am telling you that, you know, the community that you guys have put together and the hangouts that you guys have created and the relationships and stuff, this is good. This is entertaining stuff. It's fun. It's fun. You know, we go to these meetings and we, I guess, drink beer if we're in Chicago and lift pints if we're in England or whatever, but it's fun stuff and there's drama in it. It's horribly distracting though, and I want to make good software. I want to help you guys make good apps. You know, we're not about the BS. And I appreciate your guys', you know, keeping an eye out for us and helping us decide how we're going to pursue these things, because it's just part of it. It's just part of it. So David's saying, whoa, big question. He posts an epic manifesto. Let me read this real quick. I'm starting to understand plugins, better code, have some proper, the core message here is he's super stoked to make good stuff. There's no documents and no videos. Totally get it. Totally get it. Okay, so part of the reason. Oh, and LA's saying, what about index? I'm putting that on my topic. Good one. So part of the reason for the lack of documentation, the lack of videos, is just straight up like, you know, no time on our end. That's part of the reason. The other part of the reason is it's been changing so much that it's hard to lead people down. Like, I'm already paranoid about people finding these older videos because they're no longer right, right? And so there's just been change. I think now that we have this, everything on 3.0 now, I think we're going to have this, find that it's much easier to start talking about and documenting it. So David, you're not alone. We definitely want to help you understand this a little bit better. I'm convinced that you're going to be really excited once you realize how easy it can become. You'll be enlightened a little bit. So that's been kind of cool. A-Train, yeah, thanks for the kudos. He's saying the new process is better with the little sections that we can include. That's awesome. Let's visit the idea that this index.php page once again. LA's saying, what about it? What about it? So if I go to an application in my control panel, and I jump over to, I don't know, my Great Boats app, and I go to screens. I'm just going to kind of demonstrate this kind of the hardcore way. If I go to this quiz, you'll notice that we have landed on the landing page. The landing page for this plugin is indeed in the plugin directory. It's the index.php page for this plugin. This is what we're trying to move away from. But because the guy who owns this plugin, me, is lazy or something, and he hasn't updated it, it's still landing on this index page. That's why this file is here, because it's not been changed. If I go to Jim's cool circle view menu, you'll notice that I am not in this plugins directory, and I am on what I'm now calling kind of the standard landing page. And this is because he's updated his plugin, which is awesome. And you'll notice that his child rows here in this menu, if I add row 2 and I give it a nickname here, or I choose an existing screen, whatever, I'll go Google, you'll notice here how much better this is. This child menu section that he made, I think he copied the one I made, which I wasn't gonna, I was gonna give him some credit here, but it's so much faster, right? It's Ajax, the whole page isn't loading, I can update the order of things without leaving the page. Right, it's got all these cool features. I can change the properties for a child item in the raw way. I can change the child items using the UI. Right, it's just a much better approach. I can remove things without reloading the whole page. It's awesome. And so this is an improved landing page for this plugin because he updated it. So back to what LA said, what about the index page? The what about it is we're trying to get rid of it. But the fact is it's got to linger around for a little while for a few reasons. One is because not all of them have been modernized. That's one reason. Another reason is if somebody's running an older version of a self-hosted panel right now, they need that index page, or they don't have a landing page for their plugin. You know, we want them to update, but they haven't. Smug and I and a bunch of others were on a conversation in the forum that I haven't seen in a few days, but was kind of about that topic. You know, how much time do we spend trying to support this old stuff? We need to, but there's a lot of ways to do it. And so the new package will allow you to upload a plugin. The new self-hosted package will allow you to upload a plugin with the modern stuff. This is a new approach, the easier approach, the better approach. But that plugin that you upload cannot contain an index file. Can't have one, because we're protecting people who use the self-hosted package. We want them to understand this. But if you do have a plugin that uses an index page, and there's lots of reasons why an older one might, maybe it's super custom and you just need it that way, then you can do it, and you can support it on the self-hosted package. But what you'll end up having to do is, you know, use an FTP program and drag it onto your server, and then refresh your plugin folder with the admin panel, and it will work that way. So that's kind of our solution moving forward on the self-hosted panels. If you really want to customize something, you really want to dig in, you totally get PHP, no problem. You can do it that way. But if you upload it using the upload mechanism, it's not going to include it. It's not going to include it. Jake's saying, I'm seeing this when refreshing some older plugins, supported devices not found. What does this mean? Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Let's go back to our plugin that we were looking at and explain that. Well, let's look at this menu simple. If you look at the configuration file for any particular plugin, you will see here an object, a property, and a value called supported devices. If this does not exist in the config file, you will see a message that Jake is seeing. Hey, that thing's required now. Right? So what he's seeing are older plugins that don't have this in the config. And so the control panel is saying, I don't know what to do with this thing. I need to know, is this iOS? Is this Android? Is this both? And the developer did not provide this in the config file because it's old. And most of those are going to be plugins I made. Most of those are going to be plugins I made. And so, yeah, so that somebody just needs to open up that config file and add this, and that'll be that. And so that answers that question. Again, it's just this transition we're kind of fighting through. But yeah, that's how that works. And the values here that are allowed are either iOS, Android, or iOS and Android. Those are the keys that are allowed. And if you go to, back to David's question, there's a little bit of documentation, not much, but a little bit. If you go back to your plugin screen, installed plugins, and you look at one that I've made so that I can manage it, you'll notice down here this grid. This shows us a little bit about what each of these keys is for. And so in the supported devices, you can see these are the allowed values. And so that's a little bit of help. That's a little bit of help. So that's the idea there. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to also talk about I didn't forget about the rotation, Tim. I'm going to get to that last. LA's saying, what do you use then? I'm not sure what that means. Let's see here. Gotcha, understand. Okay, so let's move. I don't see any more questions that we didn't cover. So I want to talk about one more thing here. But before I move on, Jake, I'll get to yours next. LA's saying that if there's no index, what do we do? Let's revisit that idea, and I'll slow down a little bit. That's a good question. If there's no index page, you'll notice here, LA, that the landing page for this plugin, the circle view menu, is btscreen.php. That is not in the package. That's part of the core control panel. So you don't need to make it. You don't need to make it. It exists already. And so your question was, well, what do we use if there's no index page? You just don't need one. The control panel's smart enough to know what your plugin should include, and off you go. So that's how that works. Niraj, the configuration cannot be changed after first upload of a plugin. Please explain. Okay, let me go back. I'm just going to leave that one open. Let me go back to where I was. Installed plugins. Go to one of David's. He's referring to this little note down here. The unique plugin ID, the load class or action name. He's saying, how come I can't change this stuff? How come I can't change this stuff? The other things you can change. The reason you can't change this stuff is once I buy your plugin, once I'm using your plugin, once your plugin's in the system, if you change the name of the class file or you change the name of the directory or the folder and all these things about it that uniquely identify it, the whole thing's going to break. Right? If you had a plugin called Simple Menu and then 10 people had it and then you changed it to Simple Menu 3, well, you got a problem there. And so I think it's easy to understand why you can't change it. But it does mean, and David helped me with a fantastic little to-do list last week. You know, hey, if it's not in the market yet, it's not really being used yet, I should be able to freely change that. And I totally agree. I totally agree. And so there needs to be a little bit of messing around time before you kind of commit it to the market. I totally understand. And so I expect the workflow to be somebody makes a plugin, they upload it to their control panel, they keep it private, and they kind of use it a little bit, and then they share it in the market. That's kind of the goal. And you know, you would probably not say, yeah, throw this in the market until you know the damn thing works. You know, you're going to need to manage that on your own to a certain degree, but that's the purpose of this keep it out of the market, is so you guys can tinker a little bit, you know, and get it just right, maybe download a project and make sure it's error-free and all that kind of stuff. You know, none of us are perfect. I mean, I make errors all the time. Yeah, so cool. So
Jake, so great now. If something's wrong with your plugin, you can just you don't have to come to me, and you just totally. you fix it in 10 minutes. It's just fixed. It's awesome.
But we couldn't. It's important though, Sue. I'm glad you said that. But we couldn't do that for the last few days because since the new self-hosted wasn't out, you'd fix it on the Buzztouch site, but then you'd also break it on everybody else's, and so so it was definitely.
We're in a transition. You know, we can all handle it. I feel sorry for the new people.
Totally.
And then
totally.
Things are kind of not working right, and but
it's a battleground right now. Totally, it's a total battleground. David's saying here, where do the stats go? The stats are actually still exist. It's just, what is it? Plugin stats, I think. Let's look. Plugin stats. No, I can't remember the URL, but it's still there. The link's gone. I need to throw that back on there. We'll get that back up pretty soon. There's a few other little plugin adminning issues that I need to. There's some issues in the developer agreement. Just little knick-knack stuff that just really needs to do that. Sherry, are we going to be having testers? Talked about this a lot.
We had mentioned that. I don't know if I'm unmuted.
I can hear you.
Hi guys. We had mentioned that before, that the developers just have, you know, testing instead of people paying for it and then testing it back and forth. I don't mind. You guys are my friends, and I don't mind testing, but I don't have a lot of time to go through all of it. I can't become Susan. And I absolutely love. I mean, I own every plugin on the market. It's not just because I want to support the community and so forth, but I'm learning every time, and that was my big argument. We're all stealing each other's shit, if you really want to say it. Use my language. But it's like, okay, nobody's stealing anything. And I did that at first. I'm like, oh, man. And I'm like, wait a minute. Where did I get the code from? And that was my big rant online and so forth.
Yeah.
To solve the problem, can we just have like a group of us that already know? Because I don't mind testing. I do it naturally anyways.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that? Or
totally. You know? No, that's a great point. We can talk about it now for a little bit and later all we want. But you've said a lot of stuff that we've absolutely talked about, right? I mean, it makes so much sense. So the good news is now that we have this list of developers, right? Now that we have this community that's a little bit more organized because we all have our developer code and I lost that URL or whatever. It does become much easier now to remain a little bit organized and to imagine things like helping each other test, right? Imagine things like adding my little control panel to Sherry's control panel with a click of a button because she's my friend and I don't want her to have to buy it from the market. I want to sell it in the market, but I want to give it to her, right? And so there's these reasonable things that, you know, you can think of like promotion codes and things like this. Absolutely. I think more than anything, it just becomes a management issue and what the best way to test stuff is. I don't really know, maybe from a organizational perspective how to do that, and you guys can probably figure out a better way than me. That's always the case. Is the Army comes up with a better approach, which is cool. Yeah, so I love that idea. I think that's fantastic. And so maybe in the market, which is one of the last little things I want to talk about before we get to the rotation thing for Tim, because I don't want to run out of time. You know, maybe in the market there's a way to vouch for it. Maybe you give it a thumbs up, not a rating, but it's tested by me, or I don't know. The problem with sticking your neck out and doing that, as we all recognize, I think Kitsy more than anybody, some of these visitors to our site, they are very demanding of your time. And if you vouch for something, it becomes quite tedious sometimes to kind of get in that email back and forth from some guy in, you know, wherever he is, he's a wonderful guy, he's visiting, he's cool, he's making apps, he's trying to get involved, but I mean, it's tough. It's tough. And so by saying, yeah, I tested this, and all of a sudden some dude with a weird Android phone says, you tested it, Sherry, and it doesn't work. It's like, you know, your willingness to help all of a sudden turns into this baggage that you got to deal with, right?
Well, one of the things, and it was mentioned a little bit when I caught on a little late, but one of the things I've noticed, and there's some people that are coming and even saying that they have learning disabilities and this is too tough, and you know, really exposing that they have learning, you know, problems. And for me, I've noticed that the stuff that's coming up, even, you know, we just get lazy, and me myself is like, oh, you know that, but we don't. We don't. And if we could have some kind of PDF more on it, a video with them, just a little extra of this is how it goes, you know, this is how you use it, step by step.
Yeah.
The 4 different learning modalities. I don't know.
Totally. I can tell you that, you know, as much as we'd love to produce all that content, and I suppose eventually we will. In fact, Thomas made, just so everybody knows, Thomas in the UK, like my world's favorite Harry Potter 2 dude, guy's awesome. He made a bunch of new videos, just so everybody knows, he's all frustrated because there's no BTU content. Like, where is all this stuff? I'm like, dude, make some, right? So he made a bunch of videos for the self-hosted stuff and wrote a bunch of quiz questions. I can't wait to see what he tests us all on, which is great, So you can do that. You know, you can help us. And so the easiest way to do that is to make a PDF, and we can throw it in the how-to place really easy. Doesn't take any time. We can chuck it in there. It's getting a little unorganized in there. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm going to move this along. Go ahead.
Do you want to have, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you want to have like one person that we could submit this to so it could get organized? Like, let's say, just take on the gamut of, you know, here's a video, give it to somebody, because the reluctancy is to put something up there and there's stuff that you don't want to see represented by Buzztouch.
Yeah, you can send it. You can send it to any of us in terms of the leaders or whatever, and we'll tell you if it's not appropriate. We'll just tell you.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let me jump in here too, but you know, there's so many things there's so many directions we could take Buzztouch. There's so many things we can do, and we really have to prioritize. Now, we rushed and got this done. It really was, all of it was on David's shoulders to get this done. So we rushed and got this done. I know there's a lot of things developers want more, but I really think Buzztouch is to take a step back and look at what new users need, because as much as we're struggling with what we want more, new users, there's a bigger gap within Buzztouch for new users. And so you might not see some of these ideas come forth very quickly, because I really think from a prioritization perspective, we've got to really figure out what makes it better for new users.
Yeah, no, and along those lines, before I move on to the next topic, because it's absolutely related to that, you're exactly right, Sue. And I think the good news is because everybody's just, you know, on board with this and on the train kind of thing. I think all of us recognize that. And I think that things like Sherry's talking about absolutely does help these new users, right? It's jointly beneficial. Mm-hmm. And so if it's testing or if it's this or that, there is a relationship, but it's not a direct relationship to, I'm brand new, how does it work? Yeah. So you're absolutely on the right track.
One thing I put out there too is that Nicholas, Gracious Wolf PE, just volunteered to lead the developers, the Buzztouch educators group. Sherry's volunteered to lead the Women of Buzztouch. If there's someone who's willing to set up meetings and lead them, I will be the facilitator, within reason. I'll be the facilitator. I'll get it posted on the forum. If you're willing to help with that administrative work of doing that, that can help us move ahead faster. So think about what you're willing to take the leadership on, and and then let me know, and I'll facilitate for you.
Yeah, totally. The good news with all of this, you guys, and this is something that's very, very serious to me. but it takes a lot of time. It's the cart before the horse problem. Or it's, you know, the crowd that doesn't go to the social network problem. You can't build an awesome Facebook without anybody participating, because if nobody's participating, it sucks. And so now that we have a lot of people participating, and now that we have a lot of people, like in this meeting, for example, just like Susan said, a lot of new things become possible. And one of those things that is really, really important to me, and I don't know the best way, you know, how to do that, is this idea of helping you guys gain credibility outside of Buzztouch. And there's a lot of different ways to do it, but certainly by helping us and by, you know, creating content and doing, I mean, Susan is unbelievable, right? And, you know, she deserves to be recognized for that. And so I'm not sure if it's, a badge is fine and it's cool in the forum, but outside of the community, when you're bidding on that contract or you're considering doing a job, you know, your Buzztouch credibility doesn't have much meaning right now. And I really want that to be a meaningful thing for you down the road in your own professional life, outside of our community. And so we can now consider these things because we have this list of developers now. We have this, you know, these people, you guys are these people who, you know, we can help. Honestly, we can help. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. I mean, I wish it was easy to understand, but it's not. But before we run out of time, I want to get to that other topic here. And one of my friends in the chat windows shaming me. I'm very embarrassed. Susan, thank you. I should have said thank you earlier when you volunteered to organize all of that stuff. That's fantastic. I think you know I appreciate it, but I should have said it. So thank you. Let's go back to plugins. This market, this is not a market. This is a list of things, right? This is just a long, now ridiculously hard to understand list, and it needs to be fixed. And we've talked a lot about, you know, how to fix it, but we haven't done anything about it. We haven't done anything about it. So I think it's a relatively easy thing to conceptualize how this should look, but there's lots of ways it could look. I'm not convinced that I know the best way. You know, a little link, newest, most popular, best rated, that seems pretty elementary, low-hanging fruit. Yeah, that's kind of a minimum. But I'd love to hear some new, fresh ideas on how this thing ought to look that doesn't turn it into, you know, an app store, that doesn't turn it into a, you know, something that, I don't really know that. So if you guys have some concepts for that, let's talk about them. Chuck a forum post up there. Let's jump in. Let's see what this thing ought to look like. Maybe draw something up on a PDF. Hey, I think it should look like this. Whatever. It's going to be relatively easy to redesign it, but we'd love to hear about it. What you think would be cool before we throw something up. That's all I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And so this is absolutely going to get redesigned and rebuilt very fast, but we definitely want to hear first before we throw it up there. Not right now. I don't want a long list of words or whatever because I'll lose track, but maybe somebody can make a forum post or something. We can start laughing about everybody's little screenshots that, you know, look cool and figure out which one we like. Okay, so let's go to the rotation thing before we run out of time. Let me open up a project. Tim, if you're still there, this is not just for you, but I'm super stoked you brought this up. Super stoked you brought it up. Let's open up. Oh, Xcode always wigs when I'm running GoToMeeting. Let's see if it'll let me do this. Let's open up this Buzztouch project and talk about this rotation issue. It's frustrating, but it's just the way it goes. Let me get rid of this plugin. Let me look at the config file here and see what we got. Yeah, I'm going to make this easy on us all. So this is just a generic core project, nothing in it. I'm going to compile it and run it, and then we'll talk about it. The challenge becomes the iOS handles screen rotations differently based on iOS 7, iOS 6, what device, etc., etc. The goal should be on every screen you use. You should be able to control whether it rotates or not. That sounds easy. But if I go to this control panel here, I should be able to do something like this. Right? I mean, I think we would all agree that screen by screen would be the best approach. And then, of course, we would honor the core settings for screen rotation, you know, globally as necessary, right? So that's the goal. That's the goal. But I'm going to explain to you why it's been a little challenging to kind of solve and why it isn't solved yet. And then we'll talk about, you know, the future and all that kind of stuff. So if I look at this app right now, let me get it launched here. It's still compiling. Where the code runs to handle a rotation event, it changes based on the device that you have, based on a few different things. And so I'm going to show you where that is on this device, and then we can open up the conversation. So I have a generic app running. There's no plugins in it except for the Welcome to Buzztouch plugin, the generic, you know, You've Succeeded plugin. And I'm going to clear the console right here. Clear this console so it's blank. Move it over here so we can all see. Okay, so I've got a blank console, and I've got an app running on this simulator. When I rotate this simulator, when I rotate it, you'll notice here that the plugin success file, that's the plugin. Let's find it here, plugin success, this file right here. It ran an event called will rotate to interface orientation. Okay, so that is not in this file. And I did that on purpose. So some of you might be going, wait a minute. The console tells me it's in this file, but that method, will rotate to interface orientation, is not in this file. So that's why we've added this word super for you. The super class, the parent class, is where this method exists. So we know that all the plugins are based on the Buzztouch View Controller, which is the parent class or the super class. So we can look at that and find that method. So I'm just laying this groundwork. Should rotate, will rotate. Here's the will. I'm just laying this groundwork for you to show you where the confusion comes in. So when we rotate this particular plugin, let me get it back here. There we go. The plugin success parent class is running this will rotate. And then, of course, it's running did rotate because it was going to and then it did. In order to prevent that from rotating, we have to fire this should rotate so that we can say no, right? As a developer, we need to say, no, this screen should not rotate. And that would prevent it from rotating. But notice, this method did not run. And it gets confusing as to try to understand why. So in iOS 7, the event doesn't bubble up to the current view controller as easily as you might think. So we have to go over here to our delegate file, which is crazy, and look down here at the supported devices stuff. And you'll see where I put uncomment this to support iOS 6 screen rotations. This should probably say iOS and 7, but the point is it's commented out. If you uncomment this, watch what happens. I'm going to uncomment this and I'm going to compile it. The confusion gets even more confusing. So this is why we're having this conversation, because it's not that easy to understand. And we're not even talking about Android yet. Okay, so our app's running. I'm going to clear this. All we did was uncomment this in the delegate. We did not change anything in the parent view controller. We did not change anything in the plugin success plugin. And when I rotate this now, you'll notice, oh, maybe I was wrong. I thought it was iOS and 6 and 7. You'll notice that this still does not run. Still does not run. So again, we're trying to figure out where to stop it. We don't get a will, we don't get a should. Super frustrating. Let me run this in iOS 6. Let me redo this in iOS 6. and I want to demonstrate to you the differences. And so, Tim, all I'm telling you is I agree with you, but it's not consistent, and we haven't figured out the across OS versions on the device, so we haven't figured out the best way to make it easy to understand how to prevent it or allow it. That's all I'm saying. And so I'm just showing you where these different little pieces are working together, because it's something that somebody needs to figure out, me, you know, all of us, somebody. We need to kind of attack that and say, what's the best way to do this? And we're not even talking about Android yet. We're just talking about iOS. Android's a whole nother kind of nightmare when it comes to rotation. And then we also haven't talked about what happens when you're rotated and then you go back, right? It's the previous screen wasn't supposed to allow it, but the screen you're on is. And when I go back, should it flip? Even though I'm holding it horizontal, should it force portrait? And now you're talking about UI patterns that don't make sense, right? You're not supposed to flip the screen unless the user flips the screen. It's crazy. So there's just a lot to consider when it comes to rotation. That's one of the biggest challenges of being a developer, frankly, is the UI state in different situations. So here we are running on iOS 6, and I'm going to rotate this device. Let me clear the console. Clear the console here and rotate. And you'll see here, same exact result. Plugin success, will rotate, but no should rotate. Right? So if I change this to true, this begins to run, and now we can capture it, but only on 6. So I'm going to, instead of just doing a code hemorrhage, I'm not going to keep talking about this in a technical way. I'm going to keep talking about it in a what do we do about it way. So the task that needs to be accomplished is we need to identify somebody, me, you, somebody needs to take the time and figure out, based on the operating system, is it the view controller that's controlling this, the parent view controller, the delegate? I'm not 100% sure I know without doing some research. Maybe one of you guys can take the time to do that. I don't know. It'd be a fantastic contribution. But once we know exactly where it's pinpointed, then we can say, cool, look at the JSON data. Is the current screen allowing it or not allowing it? That's kind of what we got to do. It's just one of those things that we really need to fight through. But I don't know the answer right now. It just exists as a problem, and I'm glad you brought it up, because most of us are kind of hacking our way around it. Kitsy's saying Apple says individual view controller. Yeah, they're doing the will and the should, but not the will and the did, if you look here, but not the should. And it's the should rotate that we need to deal with. Yeah, so that's kind of that. So I don't have any more topics to talk about. We got through that in 55 minutes. Questions, I suppose. We can hang out a little bit. It's no big deal. Somebody in the forum, maybe LA, said, when will the plugin creator tool be online? I mean, I'm famous for saying, right now, 5 minutes, blah, 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 but I'd hope to get it on before this meeting, and I didn't quite finish it. It's pretty close. It's got some cool features and things, and so maybe this afternoon or whatever. Smug saying, hey, if we update the control panel of the plugins, will it still require a version change, 1.0 to 1.1 for an update? That's a fantastic question. The answer is no. You can update, you can re-upload another copy of the same version if you just make an error fix or something. Yeah, and I was debating like whether we forced you into going from 1.1 to 1.2 to 1.3 with every upload, but I don't think that's a good idea, because if you have a different version number, to me it suggests something different about it. And if you just fix something, to me there's nothing different about it. Revolson, do I expect a ton of uploads of new plugins now? I'd love to say yes, I expect that. Maybe the audience can weigh in and give me your feedback. I know Chris chucked up 4 or 5 the other day, which was great. Yeah, I think we'll probably get more than any of us realize, but it's hard for me to know. My plugins would be 4.5 by now if I re-uploaded every several times. Yeah, totally. Google makes you update the version of your Android app every time, and there's some logic there, but I just fundamentally disagree with it. One thing that I would like to do, and it just occurred to me now that we're having this conversation, when you, oh, I lost it again. Anyway, we don't need to look at it again. When you look at the update plugin screen, it doesn't give you a choice to, like a checkbox or something that says update the modified date. Every time you update a plugin, in our backend, the modified date is going to change. It does change. And it's that modified date that I think could lead to some confusion. For example, right now the plugin market is ordered by the last update. So that means somebody could absolutely keep their plugin at the top by uploading it every 10 minutes. And it's just like, come on, guys. And so there's these little problems that are just, it's just a lot to consider. There's just a lot to consider. But we all know these little tricks, right? And so maybe there's a checkbox that says, change the modified date or not. I don't know. But we need to get that going on. Yeah, Kristen, I see your message there. Totally. It's solvable in the app that you're talking about. It was a tabbed app, which changes it all together, whether it's tabbed or not. So I'm glad you're bringing that up because you're right. There's probably some secrets in there. Smug saying, thanks for the trick secrets. I didn't know these secrets. Yeah, none of this stuff is a secret. It's just the only difference between a secret and you not knowing it is you just don't know it yet. You will learn it, right? So me telling you it doesn't hurt anything. You just got it earlier. So that's not a big deal. I mean, none of this stuff is really a secret. It's just, oh, yeah, now I see.
There's a question for Kitsy in here, too.
What was that, Sue?
The question for Kitsy in here, too. Niraj is asking if the mosaic is based on the UI collections view. I don't know if you saw that there's a whole bunch of people that posted plugins that they're going to upload in the next few days. So
I did see that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, Susan. I appreciate that. You're like unbelievable in these meetings.
Yeah,
now
that let me unmute you. Oh, you muted yourself, Kitsy, about the UI collections view.
Yeah, is that a question? No, yeah. Niraj is asking Kitsy.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Oh, I see.
It doesn't. It's not based on the UI collection view.
It's not, okay.
It's not.
See, there's no
like UI collection view to pay. It's better to code it. I'm sure Dave will look at it.
Okay. I'm gonna throw some fire under Niraj a little bit. I can tell you guys, and I mentioned this before. I'm gonna throw him under the bus right now and make him do something about it. When I was in LA 3 weeks ago or whatever, and I stopped in and hung out with Niraj for a while, and I was looking at this plugin he's making. Dude, this thing's awesome, right? And so he's got this plugin. I'm not going to tell you what it is because that's up to him. I don't know if he's bragged about it or not, but I think you guys are going to be freaked out when you see what he's working on. It's taken him a while because it's super complex, and whether he's able to abstract the complexity from the UI and allows us app owners to play with it easily, I don't know. I'll be impressed if he can. But yeah, it's like super ninja-like. I'm like, dude, I quit. I'm done. I'm out. You do this. It's really cool. It's really cool. So I'm super happy for him. Yeah, so that's really all I wanted to get out today. I'm super happy to hang out with you guys as usual. We're super close to being over this big hump, and then we've got this January stuff that's huge and coming, and I got to jump on that. And we've got a lot of content to create in terms of videos and training, and yeah, a lot of good stuff happening.